Hey y'all, thank you for tuning in again this week. Thank you so much to everyone who subscribed and liked and told a friend. I got that from Oprah Rose show. So, I want to talk today about saving up for the down payment. I'm just going to dive right into it. You know, we don't have a lot of time. We got stuff to do. So, saving up for the down payment I think is one of the biggest hurdles of buying a house. A lot of times, like I mentioned, we hear 20%. This particular is putting 3.5% down on the home, which still can be a lot when you're thinking of a home that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I want to talk today with some specifics about what those down payment and closing costs can look like, what's included, and then I want to talk about ways that you can save money for this said down payment and ways to kind of get creative because as we all know, it's hard enough just getting from week to week. So it always seems almost insurmountable to save, 10,000, 15,000, whatever your goal is. It seems very lofty when you're looking at it from this perspective. But, with same as like climbing Mount Everest or something. You just got to take it. You don't look at the mountain and say, I can't do this. You just take it one step at a time. So that's what we're here to do today. Simply buying a house, simply saving for the down payment. So, it's funny because I couldn't even find my closing documents to my house. I found closing documents on another house I put an offer in on, which thank God didn't go through. I want to do another episode on choosing the right house because I fell in love with this other home that was way out of my budget, but I was pre-approved for it because that's what banks do. They allow us to get as much as we want, but it's up to us to really say, wait a minute, that's really not feasible for me. But long story short, I found the closing documents for that home, but not for my own. But I found it online, so I got my glasses on today. I got some notes here. So I paid a closing cost of, let's just say we're going to use round numbers. Let's say I paid a closing cost of $5,300. And where I got that number from, so the house that I purchased, again, I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, so I was able to get a nice home in a nice neighborhood for $189. There's plenty of houses cheaper, there's plenty of houses more expensive, but this is going off of a home in like the $200,000 range, which is probably a good starter number for most cities. So for a home that costs $190,000, it was like $10,000 total, but I received a grant. So the grant is what really enabled me to only pay $5,000, which makes it much more reasonable. $10,000 was kind of like, I don't even think I had that at the time. So what's included in that closing costs are application fees, processing fees, underwriting fees, your appraisal, your credit report, your flood certificate, and just tons of fees. Owner's insurance, title insurance, abstract. There's a lot, transfer taxes, record fees, pest and termite inspection, a survey fee. So there's a lot, when you go through the closing process, there's a lot of different inspections and things that you have to pay for, but that's all bundled up when you first get your estimate. So I was given anyone that looks for a house. So let's say you see a house and you say, oh, I love it. It looks great. You call your lender, and your lender who already has your information because you've been pre-approved with this lender, your lender who already has this information of your background and your history is going to send you a estimated document where it's going to have, it's going to have every single cost that you'll need. So the good thing is you're not too blindsided by anything because they do a great job at letting you know ahead of time what everything would be. What's interesting is with my house, it was only like it was $300 difference off. It was actually $300 cheaper for me as we went through the process, because they do kind of highball it a bit. So just know your estimate is very accurate. Your estimate is kind of going to be your Bible as you go through this process. So again, I mentioned what the closing costs were and what that kind of entails. It's basically fees, insurance, and it's paying the lender to do the groundwork and the research on you as a person, on the house, on the seller, all of that. So my closing costs were $7,000. Then looking at this, you have prepaid reserves. So as I mentioned on the last session, whatever we want to call these, when you pay for your mortgage, you don't have to pay for, let's say, another like 60 days. So in that prepaid, you have one whole extra month of your mortgage. You have interest, you have your homeowner's insurance for the full year. You have your property taxes for the full year. You have a homeowner's insurance reserve of 3 months, and you have your property tax reserve for 4 months. So they do a really good job at taking the onus off the homeowner, so you don't have to worry about, when you own a house, the same way you get a 1095 or a 1099 or a W-2 when tax time comes. That's how it works with buying a home. You're not ever saying to yourself, oh, I got to pay my my homeowner's taxes. You're never saying to yourself, oh, I got to write a check for my homeowner's insurance. It's just all bundled up in that monthly payment that you make every month. So, but when you're doing it, when you're first buying your house, that they give you a little leeway. So they take that money up front, and then they do a couple, like 3 months and 4 months, just in case, God forbid, anything crazy happens. So then so again, it was $10,000 that was estimated for me, and then the $5,000 grant brought me down to coming to the table with like $5,500. And it wasn't all at once. So when you look at a house, same way when you look at an apartment and you put down like some kind of good faith deposit or a, hey, I want this and I'm serious deposit, you typically will do that with a home. You don't have to, but that's just typically that's how I believe it works. So I put down an $1,800 deposit, which allowed for me to, that was at the beginning of the process. So come 45 days later is when I came to the table with I'm not a mathematician, with the other $4,000, I guess that is at that point. And it's really quite simple. The day of your closing, you get a bank check, or actually I wired it. The day before the closing, I wired the money into the title company, because you send all your money to the title company. Ways to save up for the down payment and what I did. I took my tax return. So I've had a real estate license for about 10 years in New York, and I've always had an LLC. So when you have an LLC, that allows you to write off way more than the average person would. So my tax returns have been very generous because I have this LLC, and you have expenses that you can write off, same as the big boys do. They don't have to, my LLC did not make $1 technically, but that's none of their business. And it doesn't have to make money for you to have expenses. We all, that's pretty simple there. So I just feel like there's plenty of times in our life where we find, you may kind of have like a come up, if you will. And a lot of times we say, oh, I got a big return, or, I got into a car accident like a year ago, and I ended up suing the person, and I got some money from it. And I think a lot of times we look at these events in our life and we're like, oh, I deserve a treat. Let me go buy a Gucci bag or this or that. So I will say it takes a certain amount of discipline when you're going through this process to kind of keep your eyes on the prize, because every little bit adds up, whether it's a pair of $200 shoes, whether it's, I will say I'm not that person that really started a budget and was like, oh, you're not going to go out to eat tonight. That's not what I did. That's not, I believe in living life. So, but I will say, as far as things that we don't need that we are choosing to splurge on, I think saving your money and having this in your mind is key when you're going through the process. Another thing I did was I got a assistant job on the side. So oftentimes I don't think we realize how much I got an assistant job, and it was working remote. I would recommend anybody, any small business owner, just kind of reaching out and being like, hey, do you ever need any help with anything? Do you ever need any admin tasks? Do you ever need, what do you need as a small business owner? And I think a lot of times we're able to help this small business owner and then accrue some money for ourselves. So for me, it's not like I was working tons of hours, but let's say I was getting $150 a week. That's, what is that, 600? My math might be all messed up. I think that's $600 a month. So that is great money that can just go to this process. So if you take, just small little steps, if you are intentional, if you find a way to bring in some extra income, I think that truly is what's gonna help and accelerate this process for anyone. Again, every time I get my tax return, I put it to something meaningful. Like this tax return, it came in and it went right out. I paid off a credit card. So I think it's key to look at your finances, look where you can cut things out, look where you can say, I don't need cable. Acorns is also something that I signed up for recently. And, just because I like talking real numbers, I signed up in July of 2019. And Acorns, the way it works, it takes your spare change. So it's just taking, if you pay for something and it's $1.90, it's going to take 10 cents and invest it into the stock market. I put my change on a multiplier. So for my 10 cents, it's multiplied by 3, which makes it 30 cents. Doable. We can all start there. We can all start somewhere. If you don't have 20% that you can save, start with $5. Start with $1. Start with whatever you can, but you have to start. And then once you start getting more money and finding other ways to make more money, I think that'll help. We all have hobbies. We all have things we like to do. Find that hobby. For me, real estate was a huge generator for me in terms of finances because I could do it when I wanted. It takes nothing to get a real estate license. Like, it is easy peasy. So I'm not saying everyone to become a real estate agent, but just there's ways we can look at things and say, oh, I think I can do that. Like, I know a lot of friends who do a lot of trading with, like, I don't know, stocks, I guess. That's a way for a lot of people to make a lot of money. Back to Acorns. This is what I was saying. So I started with Acorns in July of 2019. My Acorns is now at $1,500. You can withdraw your Acorns at any time you want. So that's a super easy way as well to just say, hey, I want to save, but I don't know where to start. Start with something like that. I also believe in having a separate bank account where I just take $20 a week and I just send it to that bank account. I try not to touch it, but life happens sometimes. But I would say the biggest things to saving for your down payment are finding a side hustle or a hobby that you can do that can make some money. Start using some of these financial programs because every little bit helps. Stop splurging on things you don't need. I mean, come on. Like, it gets to a certain point where you see all these people with, like, I see so many people sometimes and I'm just like, damn, how'd they afford that? But it's like, well, technically, I guess we all can afford these things, but it's what we choose to spend our money on. And just keep your eye on the prize. Know what you're looking to do. If you know you want to buy a house, then keep that in mind when it's like, oh, I really want to, treat myself and go to a fancy restaurant. Like yesterday, I went to a fancy restaurant. And I thought to myself, they were like, oh, do you want another drink? And I did the math in my head. I was like, if you get another drink, this bill is going to be probably $50. But if you just stay where you are right now with your food and one drink, you're at about 35. So every little bit helps. Like, we have to keep our eye on the prize. We can't be phased by capitalism right now. We can't. So just that's my main. So we went over ways to save some money. We went over an idea of what your closing costs would be and what that looks like in terms of what's included in it, because it just seems like such a confusing thing. Even I was looking and trying to break it down, and I was like, this is a lot of like language, but it's really just fees. So again, my closing costs were, so I guess if you think about it, so on a house, let's say on a house that costs $190,000, a 3.5% down payment would be 19 times 3, that's like right under 5,500. So you have your down payment, which is 3.5, which would be like, that's like close to like 5,500 on a $190,000 home. And if you think about it, my closing costs in total though were double. So the down payment about $5,000, the closing cost was about double that. So I would think it's safe to say that that's a nice equation. So if you can say to yourself, here's a house for, $250 that I like, take your down payment of 3.5 and then kind of double that for closing costs, fees, your home inspections, all that. That's a good starting place. There's also when you buy it, when you're looking at houses on Zillow and things like that, they have all of these mortgage calculators. A lot of times they are very low. They are not including a lot of things. So just make sure that when you're ready, you're working with a good lender that can quickly give you a estimate on what you would be paying prior to you putting an offer in, obviously. I next want to do a course on a good lender. I'm going through this in chronological order. So saving for the down payment, and then you start looking for a house, but that's where it gets fun. I think the next course should be finding a lender, because you have to find a lender and get pre-approved prior to you start looking to a house. That's the way it should go, because you need to know what you can afford. And the way that works, well, we'll get into that next week. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. It's time now more than ever. It's time to stop spending our money where it doesn't count. And it's time to start creating something for our future generation, for our neighborhoods, for us to live in Black neighborhoods with people that look like us. And the only way we can do it is if we individually start. Again, it doesn't have to be a lot of money you start saving. Start with $1. Just start. So I thank you guys. I love you all. Have a good one.